This piece of work, which is probably now about 4 weeks into its inception, is there to take that forward, test the parameters of whether we can do this bus priority, bus rapid transit thing, what it means from an infrastructure sense, from a vehicle sense, from an operational sense in particular. So this could be some really, really important work to feed into the future of bus networks in the region, in the way that we operate buses through the city centre or not, the way that we integrate regional services with BRT services. So the start of a bigger conversation, but a really exciting start around buses and the way they work in Hamilton and the wider metro area, of course. And we can come back to that one if you want to. So I'll jump forward one, the indicative business case, what we were calling PT Pathways. Now that was the major casualty from the recent funding withdrawals. So again, to paint that brighter picture and to give credit to Whakaari staff, they're taking the lead to come up with a plan B, really. So we've still got some funding available for that piece of work, primarily from the Regional Council and from Hamilton City Council. I think a little bit from Spatial and Waikato District, to give them credit. So we're actually scoping up a piece of work which will really be based around refining the programme, understanding some of those priorities that we've just been talking about, and a big piece, I think, on public transport planning. So some of the detail around the 12 years that Sarah alluded to earlier. It will still be an IBC in terms of content, but we're probably going to have to stretch it out over a long period of time. And a lot of that will still be subject to getting some central government money, I guess, in the post-June, and obviously our own LTP conversations. The Rural Access Programme, again, I'll just mention it as a piece of work that was going to be funded by some of the SURF money. We've got it to a point now where it's scoped and it's just going through the final sign off. So if there is some funding available, we can push the go button on that. The same with the comms and engagement strategy. And have I missed anything, Sarah? So I'll probably leave it there. Just wanted to give you a bit of positivism that there is some work happening and we are trying to adapt to some of the funding challenges.
Okay, no, thanks, Phil. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Phil and Sarah. I was just interested in the freight and logistics study. The economic development team has done quite a lot of work talking with businesses in the likes of the Tarapa area, and one of the key issues they raise is around efficiency of connections and then increasing congestion. To what extent do we, I guess, bring in not just modelling but actual examples or discussions with real businesses? And
excellent. It's a hell of a lot is the answer, the technical answer. So we are having we're having a series of one-on-one conversations with major and minor operators. Actually, we're trying to get a real sort of bandwidth of operators. We're having a series of focus groups. We're doing lots of good old-fashioned questionnaires, and we're using a lot of the HCC online sort of social platforms to engage as well. And we're also integrating with the Twaka group that have been doing their own liaison with freight. So I would say probably a third of that commission is around stakeholder engagement.
Okay, all right, that's good to know. Thank you. And I mean, are we going into it with like a blank slate, or do we kind of have an idea of where this might be going in terms of what we'll need in the future around supporting a more efficient freight logistics system?
Yeah, it's we're going in there with a few fundamental questions that we need to answer around, where are over-dimensional routes? Where do we need to actually guide some of the bigger freight vehicles? So some of the things that, say, maybe Robin Denton's team would need to know. So some just good planning around freight. But there are also some future trend questions, how we cater for some of the future logistics, I guess, trends, smaller packages, how we maybe use cargo bikes, how we have smaller distribution hubs. We also need to understand more about the operation of the inland ports in relation to the rail network and our aspirations to get more freight on rail. We need to understand how the logistics chains feed into those inland ports, as well as some of the other areas like Crawford Street, and but also trying to understand some of the things that we don't know, and that's a big part of the engagement as well. Do you want to? Yeah, it's quite a good study. So it's the fact that we've tried to blend in some traditionally what councils need for freights type studies, from a roading perspective and an asset management perspective, to some of the future trends and things we need to be aware of that are probably more of a future-proof cup of tea, if you like. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
No other questions. So if we can turn to page 22, there's a recommendation to receive the report. Thanks, Sarah. Have a seconder for that. I think that was Liz. There's nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Move on. 7.2 LTP alignment, which is on page 20, commences on page 25. And we still have the Phil and Sarah show.
You're so lucky. This one is just continuing the dialogue, and it will continue beyond this paper, I suspect, of how we each as individual councils are pulling together to ensure that our LTPs and our bids into the NLTF are reflective of the Metro Spatial Plan programme. And we all know that that's all going to move around as time goes on, but as long as we're all keeping an eye on it, with luck, we'll land something that, takes us part of the way there. The main highlights of this are that, in effect, what's been put into the NLTF bid process is in line with the expectation that was in the PBC in terms of CapEx and OpEx costs, broadly in line. Everybody has played their part in terms of putting submissions in that are linked to the MSP aspiration and the PBC. We know that some of those will get challenged through the LTP process, but ultimately all the partners have more or less landed things in their LTP and LTF bid that are in line with where we want to go. So I guess that's probably it, unless Phil, you wanted to add anything from your side.
I guess the obvious caveat that this paper was written a few weeks ago, and obviously we've all been moving forward with our LTP conversations, so there might be a few nuances that we need to pick up on.
Okay, I'll open it up for any questions or comments. Don't appear to be any. Oh, Jennifer and then Sarah.
Just a quick one. There was a comment in paragraph 24 about it's recommended further work is commissioned to look at how rating and value capture might be undertaken to help finance the program. Just wondering if you could expand on that, please.
We have allocated some of our funding to try and understand in a bit more detail the reality of these types of networks and how you fund them. So when we do a transport business case, we look at a lot of wider benefits, including congestion relief and things like that. There's a piece of work that we would like to commission, which is talking about how if you deliver those networks and you get the intensification and the mixed use development that you aspire to out of that, how that generates rates, value and value capture coming off the back of that. Because spidey sense is that an incoming government will be very interested in that piece of work in order to understand how the investment in public transport, walking and cycling delivers better value for the taxpayer as a whole, and how it funds itself moving forward, because this remains and will remain one of the biggest questions that everybody will have about delivery of these types of programs. So that's what that's looking at in particular.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you. Sarah, I was interested in the public transport business improvement program, and
Yes.
We had a bit of a discussion yesterday between our council and regional around that, but it's what funding may we need to actually get a entity established or some kind of real traction on that in the next 2 to 3 years. Because we've got our LTP meetings for Hamilton City Council next week. And I guess, I think there's a feeling that it's quite a priority to actually get that underway, but at the same time acknowledging limited capacity at the moment of staff.
So in that sense, are you talking about a structural authority, or are you talking about the work to deliver the PT network?
Like some kind of structural change, given we know how lumpy and difficult it, it all is. Are we able to have some kind of advice around costings by next week?
I love that response. Okay, Bill, over to you, I think.
Can
through
you
the chair.
turn off your
Oh,
mic?
sorry,
Thank
that was
you. Phil,
So I yes, the investigation of that is a task that arises from the business improvement review, as you say. The work to scope up what is needed to be done to progress with either a minor option in that continuum or one of the more significant options is something that we're really just getting underway with now. What that would cost would depend on what we would want to do as a result of that high level assessment. And I think that's the first piece of work that we do need to get underway relatively quickly. Any budget required really would at this point only be a very, very high level. So it may be that it's worth considering that collectively and making sure that there is an indicative sum included, and then we can hone that through as we do some of that more detailed work. And it could be that things like the staff submission process allow us to hone that as we go through the long-term plan hearings.
Yeah, because do you think maybe even if we put an indicative budget to begin with, that we go up to consult on, and then over that next few months before it's finalised, we would be able to have something a little refined?
Ideally, yes.
Yeah.
But when any change would occur and what it would look like is still very much for investigation.
Mm. So would we possibly be able to have some kind of indicative costing for LTPs? I mean, if there's the interest to get this program moving, I mean, even if it was.
Yeah, yes, is that
Okay.
I'm happy to take an action if you wish
Yep.
for me to consider that and come back to yourselves and other councils as required to give an indication of that collectively, and then we can move forward.
Right, thank you.
Angela.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, probably similar vein to Sarah, but just maybe a step before that would be our regional rating for PT and that conversation, and where that, maybe just a quick update for those partner councils, where we're up to, where we'll be asking for support, etc. In order to move that to those next steps that we can progress the business improvement review. Thank you.
Yeah, so you may be aware that that was one of the other action areas from that business improvement review work. And the report included a commitment for the regional council to identify options and consider an approach for inclusion within this next long-term plan process. That work is underway within the organisation, and we provided an update recently to the council that looks at a series of options, and those include who the indirect and the direct beneficiaries are of rating, and how the costs of public transport provision could be allocated either within the future-proof area or across the whole region, potentially as different options. We know that there's strong interest from partner councils in terms of looking to proceed with that. And there is a commitment for us to come and talk to each of the partner councils in more detail around that, to ensure that you're comfortable with what's proposed. There is a follow-up question about whether a launch of any change would occur in year one or could be transitioned through years 1, 2 and 3 of the next long-term plan process. But clearly within each of our revenue and financing policies and our approaches to variations to long-term plans and annual plans, we'd need to step through that process together with any of the councils that were wanting to be part of that change to ensure that we have everything lined up and consistently and transparently applied from an audit perspective and a process perspective. So that work is underway. You'll hear from us shortly.
Any other questions or comments? If not, there's a recommendation in your report and also on screen to receive that long-term plan alignment report. I can have someone to move. Thanks, Eugene. Someone to second. Chair Pamela. There's nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So we'll move on to item 7.3. RPTP update, which commences on page, where have I got that? 32. Oh, you're
Okay.
alone now, Sarah.
I'm all by myself. It feels weird.
Over to you.
So this report has been generated in response to a sort of feeling at the last meeting that came out via Angela Strange, wanting to kind of understand how the RPTP had progressed. Having sat through the hearings, she wanted to kind of, O'Leary, sorry, wanted to know how we were getting on. So this report is a summation of that. I think the key point that I would kind of put in front of elected members at this moment is there's a need for us to focus over the next 3 to 6 months on the procurement processes for low emissions fleets, integrated plans for services and infrastructure, which feed into that conversation about EV fleets, both now and in the future, and the conversation around fares and rating systems. So all of that's going to be the main priority for us in the RPT actions moving forward. There are some other areas that have come up. Those are likely to come in the next 12 months, but aren't as urgent as the ones in the top 3 to 6. That was bus back advertising. Based on today's conversation from the schools, I think the Ministry of Education items sitting in the RPTP and has come up several times in this committee and in others. Seems like it might have to come up the list. I'm seeing nods. And there was some work around accessibility modelling and analysis that was included in the RPT as an action and a policy, which will probably happen, but will be happening in the longer term at this point. So that was kind of a brief update. Other than that, I'll take the report as read.
Okay, no, thanks, Sarah. Open for questions, comments. You're Adrian.
I'm happy to move it, but I'd agree that I think the Ministry of Education conversation needs to be had sooner rather than later from strategic. With public transport, you need that information to work with. And given city schools are so large now, it's not a small problem. And it is impacting them if the buses aren't there for them. So yeah, happy to move.
Okay, thank you. Have a seconder for receipt. Okay, I've got.
Sorry, the question. Sorry, the question.
Yeah. Well, I'll note Liz has seconded it, and
Yeah.
then over to you, Sarah.
Thank you. So going back to the, firstly, thank you for this, Sarah. With the low emission buses, what is it looking like for Hamilton? Like, are we needing charging area? What's it to?
Yeah, so work's progressing on that. There was some work done with WSP a while ago that effectively locked in the EV fleet conversation. There's work continuing with Waka Kotahi, who've very kindly given everybody in New Zealand the opportunity to use Jacobs to try and right-size their fleet requirements and get a better understanding of what that looks like for each fleet. There's a network component to this, and quite a bit of network thinking that kind of needs to drop into that approach as well, because the network we have now is not the network we aspire to in the future. So we have to link that into that process as well. It is all progressing. The Fleet Max work has just started, so hopefully we'll get an idea of numbers, but it's all interlinked. The contract work, the EV work, the work looking at depots, they're all very tightly linked together. And it's got to be a real focus for our teams over the next 6 months to try and get a really clear picture of how we want to proceed with that. So that's why I've highlighted it in this report.
Okay, thank you. And just my other question was whether, coming back to that business improvement review program, is this the right place for progress on that to be kind of updated through, or?
It's an interesting one because I don't think it's contained as a sort of policy objective within the last RPTP. So I'll have if we can, we'll get back to you on that, because you may want to look at it as a bit like the MSP, more of a standing agenda type item.
Yeah.
But I'll defer to my director. If I may, Phil, sorry.
As Sarah says, they're all separate but are all connected, and I think we need to just map that out. I've asked for a really detailed project plan for how we progress through the network reviews and the options that come out of the Sustainable Public Transport Framework in the context of how we prepare for contract renewal processes that need to get underway in the next 12 to 18 months. So there are a series of component parts to the process we have to follow to be able to frame up this round of contracts, and depots, vehicle fuel, parts of those. So and how we operate are all part of that too. So I think it ends up needing to be a wider story, but with a series of steps that we'll go through to get there.
I guess it would be quite, I mean, if there's support from others, it would be quite good to have some kind of running update or a touch point on governance side of that, business improvement.
Yeah, and as you say, over the last few days, the conversations have moved forward a bit. I think there's value in us spending some time through all of that and coming back to you with a clearer plan. Maybe that's a task to meeting that we can show you how these things all fit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Nothing further. No. So the recommendation to receive the Future Proof Public Transport Advisor report. Got here Adrian and Liz seconding. We'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So our next item is 8.1, network planning update, which is page 41, sorry. Just looking at my notes. Welcome to Catherine and Vincent. Over to you.
Great, thank you. Good morning, councillors and committee. I'll take the network planning update report as read, but I do want to highlight a few key things that might be worth mentioning. The first being is that we have quite a large amount of our refresh network changes being implemented in February, which is really great progress on the refresh project, and ranges from minor timetable tweaks to returning some services back to their pre-COVID reduced timetable level, which is really great. You will see as an attachment, we have undertaken a review of our on-demand services, both the Night Flex and the Airport Flex. Both of those reports have highlighted a number of areas of improvement, with our team still needing to work through the feasibility, logistics, costs of potential service changes or enhancements. In terms of the Waikato District Council trials, those are progressing well. We have an anticipated launch date for the Tamaheri Mātangi service as the 12th of February. Conversations with the Ministry of Education have confirmed that our timetable is not deemed suitable for school transport, and so our services can continue and operate alongside each other, which is great. Raglan service enhancements, the decision has been made to split some of the service enhancements there for cost purposes. So we will begin a service enhancement of the existing number 23 Raglan service anticipated for April next year, as well as an extension of the Whatawhata School Assist to Kofi to enable a Kofi connection to Hamilton, with Raglan on demand, subject to funding support from Waka Kotahi. So that is TBD. Waipa on demand, we have also been looking at the feasibility of that. We have had the Waipa business case, which has staged out public transport within the Waipa district. And we have had conversations with the planning team at Waipa District Council to align our planning and thinking on that. We are both in agreement that to stick essentially to the business case timeline, but with the quite significant service enhancement of the Cambridge and Te Awamutu services happening in January, that we really do want to spend some time analysing journey patterns and patronage from that to then plan for on-demand in the next 3 years for implementation of any on-demand possibly after that. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Catherine. Questions? Liz?
Yeah, thank you. Hey, so you're really excited to see the on-demand, as Angela will know here as well, for Cambridge, Te Awamutu, so for Waipa. I guess because the on-demand we're looking at having within our two larger towns, either Cambridge or Te Awamutu. So I guess the increased services for me between the city and our larger towns probably isn't as relevant as perhaps some of the information that's now being gleaned from the night service or the flex service that's been operating in Hamilton City, but also some of the learnings that perhaps can be taken out of the Timaru kind of on-demand service as well. So I'm really interested to try and pull some of that information out. And there's some in this report, but I think it would be really helpful to take the learnings from the other trial that's been happening in the South Island. And I think that will hopefully feed into, I guess, into what hopefully will be an on-demand service for one or both of our towns in Waipa. I'm going to ignore the word possible for 2027, a possible start, launch. I'm just going to, in my head, I think that the demand is there within our larger towns. No question. I think when we look at the data and the way that our Waipa residents already use public transport, there's no demand, no, for my mind anyway, I think an on-demand service within our towns will be really well utilised. So I really want to focus on moving as quickly as possible to a launch date in 2027. Welcome an earlier year as well. I know Roger would be keen on that, but if it's 2027, if that's the earliest we can do it, then then I'm really looking forward to that.
Eugene.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. Catherine, on the airport flex service, so if you look at the costs on page 52 and the patronage, that equates to roughly about $130 per ride. That to me sounds pretty ludicrous. What planning or what thinking is going into try to reduce that? So, I'm thinking there's taxi services and companies that are in Hamilton there. well aware of the flights that come in and out and sit out there waiting to pick up customers. Why are we spending $132 per ride, bringing people into the city when there's a service there? Should we not be looking at how to maybe assist, working with a cab company or something of the likes to, you'd probably be able to take that down to a quarter of the cost? I just feel as though that it's just crazy money, and I don't think it's money well spent. So,
Catherine.
Thanks. Through the chair, yeah, it's not great. Out of the two on-demand services, it's very clear that that one in particular requires significant service changes if it were to continue. That is a good idea to, work alongside taxi operators as well. We are still working through the implications and costs and feasibility of significant service changes, and through that process to, hopefully be able to determine whether the outcomes of any changes will drastically reduce that. That would be the key objective for the service. Yeah, we do acknowledge that. That's quite poor. Yeah.
yeah, thanks for that. That's good to hear. I think like the Nightflix service, that's probably works out at about $19 per ride, but there's a lot of benefits in that service, getting people safely in and out of the city at night. So, I support that, and you've got to take some hits every now and then, but the airport flex service seriously needs some looking at, and I think the sooner the better. We don't want to continue wasting money like that.
Absolutely.
Ooh. I've got Liz, and then I've got Jenna from there, I think Angela, and then I think Mayor Adrian was. Okay.
Yeah, look, I guess, the airport service was certainly a good idea. And I understand, I was, I guess, supportive of it. But I think you get to a point where you think, and you look at the data and you think, actually, it's just not working. And you can see with the survey's been helpful because it's identified why it's not working as well. I guess just the inconvenience, the time of the flights, So there's obviously there's some weightings there that are really relative. So I probably support probably not continuing with it. But I have a suggestion for what we might use those existing buses for. It's probably not a surprise. I was going to suggest that probably Cambridge is what is the next largest town, apart from the city. Perhaps, a trial for flex on-demand service could be used. And in saying that, it's probably a really good opportunity. And I guess I'd probably encourage staff to work with our council as well. Maybe there's a deal to be done here. And it would be helpful, I think, for the other regional towns too, in modelling what it looks like for the Waikato and how well it's utilised, and that information can be shared. So anyway, that's just my suggestion.
Jennifer, then Angela.
Thanks. No, I like that one, Liz. Around the airport one, similar comments to Eugene. And I suppose when there is a direct stop, like we have on some of our other circuits, like the CHB or the university, where there's a bit of a deal around fare recovery from them contributing, I would have wanted to see that with the airport, since we're helping them with the service through this. On one hand, I'm thinking, if you can afford to fly, you probably can afford a taxi, and a lot of things are recovered through business costs, etc. Like if we only have 6 vehicles like this, let's use them really effectively. Hence, I like Liz's suggestion, or elsewhere. Of course, obviously the Nightflix, seemingly from the data, and even from my own experience, it's the increased services that would probably, through what we've seen with the meteor and else, lead to even increased patronage still. So keen to be supportive of the Nightflix and looking what else we can do there for sure. And then there was a comment in here about passenger feedback has indicated a willingness to pay more than $2 per trip. I think that definitely should be explored for similar reasons as comes up for just in general bus services and rising costs that we're seeing there. So I'm sure there could be a number found there that would help obviously make this pay for itself more and more over time. Since the trial, I would say there is quite successful and promising. So those are my main comments. Thank you.
Angela.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Catherine and Vincent, for the report as well. Yeah, I agree with what's been said already. The costs, yeah, are too high for the airport one. Initially, I believe it was meant to be a year trial, which dragged on a little bit. But yeah, fully support what Councillor Liz is suggesting with redeploying those vehicles to do a right-sized trial within the Waikato. You know, that would give us really good data that's different to what the night flex offers. Yeah, I recently had conversations with a councillor who wanted to know our experience with flex. They were down in Horizons. But what they wanted to know was probably more what we would know if we did a Cambridge trial. So yeah, it definitely would be better use of those vehicles as well. Just on another note, very pleasing to see that the night flex is meeting those needs that we set out for it to meet, for it to be a safe alternative mode of travel. Would really like to see it extended as well to the uni for O Week and that sort of thing as suggested in the report. I think, yeah, a lot of vulnerable people make unwise choices during O Week. So yeah, if we could support with their safety, yeah, and maybe partner with the university to subsidise that as well. Yeah, thank you.
Mayor Adrian, was your query answered?
Yeah, I think it pretty much was. I just support that. And I guess the obviously not being here beforehand, I guess what was the purpose for it to be set up in the first place? Like what outcome was it seeking to achieve would be the question that I'd have for this flex service. Like we all talk about traffic congestion and all that sort of thing. What was the purpose for this that drove this? Can I just understand that, please? Sarah will answer it.
Oh.
Sorry, they're looking very keen. I'll defer to staff. Can you just enlighten me, please?
Catherine.
Laughing at the. Thank you. Yeah, my understanding was just that I think the airport, it is a key destination for Hamilton. My understanding is that there has been interest in improving our public transport connections to the airport. And I think that this was just the initial way of gauging that interest and just as a solution to, yeah, the need, I guess, and the just wanting to do it, and let's provide a connection to the Hamilton airport. Yeah,
No, that's
hasn't,
cool.
yeah, it hasn't been like that successful. And I do just want to say that my plan moving on from here, I guess, was for the next future-proof committee work through some of these recommendations and put together, you know, the feasibility and costs. But if there's a unanimous position to actually withdraw the service, I guess, then I don't know.
Yeah.
Want to do that.
So I guess this is the thing, is understanding who the passengers are on the plane, because it's a regional airport. So there's a volume of passengers that actually aren't coming to Hamilton. They're either heading back to North Waikato, or they're heading to East Waikato, or they're heading to South, you know, like it's, so I guess it's understanding what the capacity was, given there's already a private service there. But anyway, that's cool to understand. Thank you.
Sarah, then Liz.
Yeah, just as some further context, the airport shuttle itself was actually an elected member push, so it wasn't advice from staff to so that came from last term. So anyway, just as some extra feedback, yeah. And so I think my view would be that given what we've seen from the trial so far, that if on a high level look at it, staff believe actually that resource would be better allocated and would get a lot more bang for buck and benefits for the community by reallocating that to, something else, then we wouldn't want to spend lots of time trying to make it work if we think, it's just going to work better putting that elsewhere. In terms of my question was around the submitters today, and I hope this is the right part of the agenda to raise it, but we had one issue raised around the meteor, and I guess it's an issue we've talked about before where we bring together two routes. There are winners and losers, and we did talk about actually using Flex as a way to fill the gaps where some people who need public transport and can't necessarily walk the extra 10 minutes now to their bus stop can still access it easily. So what thinking have we done around that? Or how do we make it more equitable when we make these changes and try and go for this high ridership, but potentially leave some people who are very dependent on public transport behind?
Yeah, through the chair. I think this is a question that we face all the time, and we try our best to work through it. And as we shift more and more towards more high frequent, more direct services, I think this is going to come up more often, moving away from coverage to more direct. There is that risk of creating these shadow places, I guess, a little bit where connections have been lost, or the frequency for those, in those areas has been reduced. I think that the meteor, I think we've been able to get some good learnings from it. It is tricky because fundamentally there are, as you mentioned, winners and losers a little bit. And we are this early in the launch of the service. We do also anticipate and expect these conversations, which require minor detouring or routing or timetabling whilst we find the fine balance of the service to get it right. We know that Mansell Ave, we get quite a bit of feedback there, so it's certainly an area that we're keeping an eye on. But we do like to perhaps not be reactionary, I guess, and make changes right away. I know we've been operating for 3 months now, so it could be time to really look at it and say, does this area need tweaking or not? So in terms of winners and losers, it's a bit tough. And how we approach these, I think, differ on the context and what's there, and what other supporting infrastructural services, but also availability. We don't have spare flex vehicles at the moment to operate an on-demand, for example. But for example, if the airport flex pulled away, then possibly we do. And it's just, I think, a constant working of what resources do we have and what can we do with it effectively, and costs and contract constraints.
Okay. Thank you. Because like when we first looked at the meteor, another bit of strong feedback was around, I think there's like a small retirement or elder people's area around in the Dinsdale area, which then also lost the close and direct access. So I guess maybe in looking at the flex review, is it possible, even if we don't have the resource to do it now, but to look at the feasibility or the worth of value of trying to plug some gaps where we do end up amalgamating routes?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is in our RPTP, in terms of assisting this transition to high frequent networks, is that it is quite clear, and the plan is quite clear that we will be using Flex to assist in filling those gaps. It's just, I suppose, getting the timing right and locations right. So it is definitely a way in which we will help deal with that.
Okay, thank you. And just finally, sorry, with the Hamilton Girls High School presentation, it would be great. Are we going to have a direct response to them on the points that they've raised in that submission?
We can do, yes. I think it's quite interesting because we are doing a lot of those refresh changes at the time, and most of those services are undergoing enhancements or tweaking regardless in February. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not that has addressed some of the issues. In terms of the Hamilton City services, it's always achievable to do minor tweaking. Again, we do like to look at all bus users equitably, who use the service. In terms of the regional services, it is a bit more difficult increasing, frequency on those, and it's a bit of a, lag time, I guess, to do that, and larger funding requirements, but certainly timetable tweaking is something we can look at.
And when are we likely to move back to the pre-COVID schedule? Because I understand we're still not back there.
So most of that will be achieved in February. The northeast of Hamilton is the next, probably the only area left in Hamilton City, which will still be out of pre-COVID levels. It's a very interconnected network up there, so we wanted to look at that holistically. So as of February, majority of Hamilton will be, bar the northeast.
Okay, thank you. That's good news. Thank you.
So I've got Liz, Sarah R, and then Angela.
Yeah, no, and look, thank you again through the chair. So just picking up on the airport flex, I appreciate the reason for the extension of the trial because COVID. We were waiting for Air New Zealand schedules to reach back to their pre-COVID levels, but I think we're there, and I think that we can see that there's not unlikely to be a large uptake. So I'd quite like to look at the resolution again in our papers and put a finite date on the airport flex. I don't see that there's any point just letting this run on for another 6 months, another year. I don't know how everybody else feels about it, but yeah, we might as well act if we can see the data in front of us. We've got the information, but I guess our recommendation here would be important to wherever the decision making finally lands. And yeah, appreciate the rationalisation about where we might divert those services. So yeah, there needs to be an absolute process around that. But I would, be really keen to be part of that conversation. Will that conversation potentially happen in this committee? I guess that's the question I have. Because we've got a lot of data and a lot of LTP discussions, of course, happening at Waipa, and I'm sure we're all in that same space. And so we'd need to kind of move reasonably swiftly as well.
We'll come back to the resolution or recommendations in a moment, Liz. Sarah R and then Angela.
Kia ora, just a very brief question because I haven't been fully across the background of this service, being quite new. How are customers of the airport day to day made aware of the service?
So there are billboards and posters at the airport. I was actually there on the weekend and I made sure to see them. So there was a marketing campaign, a bit of a push, I think, quite a while ago, and Trudy from operations may be more across that than I am. But yeah, I think that is one of the recommendations as well, is to improve the marketing for the service. I think there's still a gap of how many people even know about it.
Which leads me just the question, is there anything made available when people book flights that the service is available?
That's another one of the issues, I guess, is that the flex operating times doesn't always align with the flight times. So it's probably more aligns with going to the airport than it does returning from the airport in the afternoons or evenings. But yeah, you are able to book your time slot through the app.
Okay, Angela.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just 2 different points, I suppose. Just on paragraph 11, when we're talking about the refresh changes and many of the services coming back to pre-COVID levels, and also just thinking ahead to the Rotorua rocket launch, is there some sort of halfway solution we could possibly have, like a Chartwell Express? You know what I mean? Like on their way to a Rotorua rocket, getting some frequency from Chartwell into town and back. It's a very popular route and, a big catchment area, a walkable catchment area, that if more people could catch a more express or more direct bus, could boost patronage. So I'd possibly like some thinking to go into how we might step into a Rotorua rocket. And Chartwell would be a natural first step. And then another suggestion on the airport flex. I know that there was some talk about the buses to Hamilton, Te Awamutu, possibly diverting off-peak if there was demand to go to the airport, and alternatively Cambridge, Hamilton, off-peak. But yeah, just keen to maybe hear some thinking about reasons to or reasons not to. Yeah, just in some further update. Thank you.
Okay. There's been following up where Liz was starting to head in terms of another recommendation, in terms of timeframes and all of that. There's been some conversations going on either side of me in terms of that. So who's to? Yep.
Dave can correct me. We think that it's a potential way forward for you to consider is that there's a recommendation from this subcommittee that you'd like staff to consider the discussion and the actions from today and prepare some alternatives perhaps for discussion at the next meeting. Challenges for us around that are in terms of the delegations of this subcommittee and the direction versus the delegation that you can provide to that process. And in the context of the LTP process and our funding applications in through TO into NZTA funding, how we can align with those or would need to amend those as we go. So there's various parts to it that mean it's very hard for us to say today that we want to go or stop something at a certain date or start something on a certain date. But I think if we can, if there's a recommendation that allows us or directs us to start that work, then we can look to do so quite happily. Your support.
Sarah, can you turn off, or are you going to want to speak? Okay. Liz.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, I understand that there's a lot of thinking that needs to occur around this, but I don't think that you necessarily have to transition something straight away. You can stop something, have a gap, have a breath. I just don't see any point wasting good money after bad on a service that's just costing. So if there's savings to be made and there's a period of time where there's nothing occurring, fine. So I'm just probably trying to understand if it's agreed that the transport, so the airport service will discontinue, surely that wouldn't take a whole year. Is there some kind of, how swiftly can we act on this?
No, I certainly wasn't suggesting that sort of length of time. And clearly, as has been said, we're at the end of a trial period, and this report came to you because we had reached the end of that trial period to give you an update on where things were at. So we've clearly got some direction from you today that think that trial should end, and we'll manage that process, as you say, separately from what the options are for the use of that fleet going forward. And
obviously then come back further.
Absolutely, yes.
Guidance from the committee.
Well, yes, I think so. Yeah. Yep. Is it possible for us to provide that update through to the next meeting, do you think, Catherine?
Sure.
You think?
I think my only concern is that if we were to retain it and we were to do significant service enhancements that will require additional funding, we have applied for funding. We're not going to know in formalities until, early next year, April-ish kind of time, which is just another thing that I'm bearing in mind.
Well, I think critically in terms of reporting back in February, if there are still some matters, outstanding, that'll be part of the discussion at that time. But at least if it's coming back in February, the process is carrying on. Angela.
Yeah, just trying to understand the process, I suppose. So if it did come back to us in February, how soon after that could it end?
Well, again, I think that the direction of the committee today will help us make a decision about ending it. The question is probably from our side is more about what are the options from that point. If there is a consistency that you think that that trial needs to stop, that's one. The second part is what do we do next, which I think will take us a little more time.
Thank you.
Yeah, Adrian.
I kind of feel it's two decisions. It's one to stop it, but then it's what if. I think the decision here is that it's not feasible. It's stopping it. It's recommending to whoever decides that it's going to be stopped, and then for the whoever to consider the options for that. Because it's can't happen. We can't keep this going until we've got a solution for the next thing, because it's, to me, it's a waste of money.
So who does the recommend, if this
Who's it going
committee
to? Yeah, who decides?
recommended that the service cease, where does that go to from here?
That was the question.
Oh, I suppose I feel like we're wishy-washing around this, and I think that I just I want whoever needs to hear the really clear steer from this committee, which is based on the evidence that has been put before us. This trial doesn't appear to be successful. We don't want to throw good money after bad. I think that correct me if I'm wrong, Democracy Dave. I would see this committee make a statement and a recommendation that to that effect, that we don't, as a committee, we don't feel that this trial has been successful. We would instruct staff to go through whatever process is appropriate to bring this to an end as soon as possible. But that's what I'm. That's what and if that is not, if there's something that is an impediment to that directive, tell us now. Do you know what I'm saying? You with me?
I could perhaps be asking a question instead of providing an answer here. So the delegations of the committee do allow for non-significant variations to policy and whatnot, and that's pretty straightforward. The question that I pose is, does the service run under the RP, the Public Land Transport Plan? Would it be considered a significant variation to that plan? In which case, if it is, I would say that then a recommendation needs to come back to this committee to make an amendment to that plan following the significance policy that's attached to it.
And in the meantime, we continue to incur costs until a February meeting. Is somebody looking into? Yeah.
In the interim, I have been so bold as to record an action note, which we could turn into a resolution.
For that.
And the note that I've written to this point is that staff review the Flex Airport service with a view to discontinue the service and report back to the next meeting of the subcommittee. And I think that probably sends a clear message as to the goal here, that we want to discontinue the service.
I'm just wondering whether there was adding to that, but something in that recommendation, if may not be the right words, if appropriate, that the service be, because the staff may look at it, have the feel that there is the ability to cease and then get on with it. If they don't, that's when they come,
the committee is trying
got
to
to come
say.
back. Is that where you want to head?
Chair, on that, and given it is a trial, I suspect that is where we will be able to have that flexibility.
Yep.
So I think that's the key to it, and I see Sarah coming up, so I'm hoping that she's got the magic bullet here.
And if I can add to that, just in the paper under threats, it says, especially given that this service could be regarded as non-core to the RPTP objectives.
So what I suggest, and I'm looking at the time, we'll just leave this for the moment. There's a bit of, unless there's a quick
The decision does not appear to be consistent based on the significance policy in the RPTP. It doesn't appear to be a significant decision. So on that basis, your recommendation would lead to a decision on that.
Okay,
And then we could come back to you in February with some options for discussion.
so if you, okay,
So sorry, did I understand that correctly? You're saying that it is within the mandate of this committee that we could recommend ceasing this service and instructing staff to come back to the February meeting with further suggestions of how the fleet could be utilized in another manner. Is
Correct.
that-
Correct.
Yeah.
so if we just leave this on the table for the moment, staff can fine tune based on the discussion, and we'll come back before we close the meeting and resolving on it. So on that basis, we'll move to, bearing in mind we're now 12, 8.2 on page 63, service performance and operational update. Oh, Trudy and Vincent. Who's kicking off? Are you, Trudy? Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Look, due to time, I won't keep us for too long. I request that the report be taken as read. However, in summary, a couple of little sound bites post this report being written. A lot of conversation around Meteor today. Just like to mention that as of yesterday, we've hit 223,000 boardings since the service commenced. And also just wanted to touch on the ticket types that we are seeing coming through are in terms of profile is uplift from adults, the new sort of community concession products, so the youth and the youth plus are our largest ticket types and therefore usage. So what does that mean? It's looking to achieve some of that sort of mode shift, that we've anchored in our RPTP. Also, just to mention, in terms of those initiatives with Community Connect, B card sales through July to September were 10,000 new card purchases compared to 6,000 the same period last year. So that is indicating, an uplift in interest in public transport based on those analytics. One other thing I would like to mention was to Whita Ora. The launch of that concession went live on the 16th of October. I haven't got any numbers to share, but currently those 4 stops that are earmarked with a concessionary product are being heavily utilised. So I can share some numbers next time we come back. But otherwise, open to any questions
Okay,
from the
thank
floor.
you. Angela.
Yeah, thank you. More of a comment than a question. Those are really amazing numbers for the Meteor and also the B card sales as well. So well done, team. And it's definitely the way that we want to be heading for patronage and that mode shift, like you do say, Trudy. So thank you. And long may it continue. Thank you.
Sarah.
A quick comment as well to say that it's fantastic to see those really good numbers for the Meteor. That's an excellent start to the launch, and so congratulations on that. I think it shows that frequency works. People in Hamilton actually will take the bus if it's frequent and convenient. So, we will see that same result if we keep putting out those frequent routes. So it's really promising.
Chair Pamela.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just wondering if there's some good news stories that we need to share a little bit broader here out of today. I think that the uptick in B card purchases. I think it's a signal of some of the cost pressures that our community is under, but I also feel that it provides a supporting argument for further commitment and investment and need for public transport, particularly within our metro spatial area. And it's one of those things where we all know that once people get into new habits, then those habits can continue. So while the uptick may be triggered by increased fuel costs, once people get used to that as a mode of transport, even if fuel costs came down, I think we would see continued patronage. And so I think there's a real good news story there. I think there's a great news story with the Meteor patronage, but also just that the statistics we've seen today around that night flex service. I think there's a good story to tell about how we look after citizens in this community. As you mentioned, particularly at times where things might be a little bit more vulnerable late at night. And that's also about looking after the health and safety of our community and providing some good affordable options. So just wondering if we can look to tell those stories. Stephen.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Chair, just on that, I thought spoke well on that. And actually, when we are looking to advocate to government around, on that previous matter around the SURF funding and our transport program, I think it's really valuable to actually show them that we're having record numbers of people using public transport in the city, and that it is critical for people addressing the cost of living, but also it's working. So let's continue. I'm really nervous that we're not hearing the most supportive kind of noises around public transport. So we need to show it, people are using it and it's working. So I think showing those graphs and those numbers would be really helpful.
Okay, there's nothing further. There's some clear messaging in terms of telling those good stories and the use of that information. So we'll leave that to the team to pick up on, and also the media with Stephen here. Okay, we have a recommendation on page 63 to receive the service performance and operational update. Thanks, Angela. We're coming back to that. Yes. And Chair Pamela seconded. If there's nothing further, I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So we'll now go to the last report in terms of 8.3, in terms of the public transport infrastructure update. Catherine. And we're taking it as read.
Yes, please do take it as read. I think we've had some infrastructure discussions already. So in general, most district council or all district councils and the city council are progressing with what they can at the moment and what was already in the pipeline in terms of bus priority and bus infrastructure and improved shelters and whatnot. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Liz.
Yeah, look, I think it's just a typo, but just at the bottom of page 2, it says Waikato District Council, but it refers to Waipa. So as long as everyone realises that. Thanks.
Apologies, it missed the heading.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's all good.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? There are not. So on page 72, mover and seconder to receive the public transport infrastructure update report. Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Eugene. Nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Now we'll flick back to 8.1 and there'll be a recommendation magically appear here, Dave. Okay.
read this out for you all. We've added a resolution that the Future Proof Public Transport Subcommittee requests that the Flex Airport trial service be discontinued and that staff report back to the next meetings with options for other Flex services.
Happy to move.
Thanks, Liz. Okay, Mayor Adrian, any discussion on the two recommendations? I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So that completes the meeting agenda. And before I hand over to Phil in terms of a closing Karakia, a couple of things I wish to highlight. I thought prior to our formal February meeting that we actually have a workshop. And my thinking around that is that this is the subcommittee's been going around 6 or 7 months. I thought it would be an opportune time really just to reflect on that, how the meetings, how you feel the meetings go, the tone, the nature of them. Also part of that discussion in terms of I'd be interested in feedback on my chairing and all of that. Really just to have a roundup of how you feel the subcommittee's going, how the meetings go, and anything else. And then from that depends where we land, what we might do in terms of any actions as a result of that workshop. So that's what I was going to pose immediately before the next formal meeting. And I know it seems early, but really best wishes for the festive season and 2024. I'm going to see a number of you in the 2 weeks' time in this very room in terms of future proof, but certainly in terms of the subcommittee. So it's really been a pleasure to chair in the last 6 months or so. And I think some of the conversations that we're having, and I think it's important for the subcommittee to have those conversations as opposed to having too much of a formal structured meeting. As you would have seen, I'm not one that has standing orders in my left hand because that's just this type of arrangement is trying to get some good outcomes from the discussions we have. So best wishes, and we will see you for this subcommittee in I think February or late February is the next scheduled meeting. But yeah, early February according to Phil. And also just noting that lunch is next door in the next door room at the conclusion of this meeting. And I'd just like to acknowledge the work of all of the partner staff, both in terms of getting the subcommittee established, but also now in terms of its operations and the staff reporting and discussions and follow-up actions. So thank you all. Phil.
Karakia. Unahia, unahia. Unahia mai te uru tapanui. Kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinanga, te hinenaro, I te arataka tū. Wai rā e rongo, I whakaria ake ki runga, kia tina, tina. Umi e, hui e, tāki.
Thank you. Meeting closed.